The collapse never announces itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as continuity, wrapped in familiar routines and trusted institutions. By the time people sense something has shifted, the system has already moved into a new phase. Every society tells itself the same story, that this time is different, that progress is permanent, that complexity guarantees stability. But history shows a simpler rhythm. Structures rise, confidence hardens, and success slowly rewires collective behavior. Over time, comfort replaces caution. Assumptions become invisible, and a single, repeated mistake begins to take shape beneath the surface. It isn't a sudden catastrophe. It is a gradual drift. Systems grow larger, denser, and more interconnected. Decisions become abstracted. Responsibility spreads thin. Early signals are absorbed, rationalized, and filed away as temporary noise. People adapt to each change as if it were normal, because individually, each change feels survivable. Together, they form something else entirely. The pattern appears across civilizations, empires, and financial architectures. It moves through governments and corporations, through currencies and cultures. It doesn't depend on ideology or geography. It emerges wherever human psychology meets large systems. First comes expansion, then refinement, then dependence, and finally, a subtle transition where resilience gives way to fragility. What makes this pattern so persistent is not ignorance. It is familiarity. Humans are remarkably skilled at normalizing gradual shifts. We recalibrate our expectations in real time. We learn to live inside new conditions without pausing to question how those conditions formed. Each generation inherits structures built by the last, assuming their permanence, rarely noticing the hidden stresses accumulating within them. At the center of every repetition is the same quiet assumption that tomorrow will resemble yesterday, that institutions will behave as they always have, that incentives will remain aligned. That trust, once established, is self-sustaining. These beliefs are not foolish. They are efficient. They allow complex societies to function at scale. But they also create blind spots. As systems mature, they begin to prioritize stability over adaptability. Rules multiply. Procedures thicken. Layers of administration form protective shells around core functions. Over time, flexibility fades. Feedback loops slow. Small distortions linger longer than they should. And people inside these structures grow accustomed to operating within narrowing boundaries, mistaking constraint for order. The final mistake does not feel dramatic when it happens. It feels reasonable. Leaders defend continuity. Institutions protect their legitimacy. Individuals protect their routines. Everyone acts in ways that make sense locally, even as the larger structure drifts further from balance. No one believes they are participating in decline. They believe they are preserving what already exists. This documentary is about that moment, not the collapse itself, but the phase before it, the space where systems still appear intact, where daily life continues, where markets open, offices fill, and laws are enforced. It's about the collective psychology that keeps societies moving forward even as foundational conditions quietly change. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and every rhyme begins long before anyone hears the echo. For those watching closely, the silence between transitions often speaks louder than headlines, revealing how deeply collective behavior depends on stories we rarely examine. In ancient Mesopotamia, record-keeping expanded alongside trade, creating the first bureaucratic states. In Rome, legal codes and road networks knit distant provinces into a single organism. In imperial China, civil service exams produced generations of administrators trained to preserve continuity. Each system began as an innovation, each matured into a structure, and each eventually faced the same internal tension between growth and adaptability. At first, expansion brings clarity. New rules replace chaos. Shared standards reduce friction. People feel safer inside predictable frameworks. Productivity rises. Confidence spreads. Over time, however, success changes incentives. Institutions start optimizing for preservation rather than function. Leaders inherit complex machinery they did not design. Decisions become filtered through committees and protocols. The system becomes harder to change precisely because it once worked so well. Empires illustrate this rhythm with remarkable consistency. As borders extend, supply lines lengthen. As populations grow, coordination demands increase. To manage the complexity, societies add layers: tax offices, regulatory bodies, professional classes. These layers solve immediate problems, but they also introduce distance between cause and effect. Actions at the center take longer to register at the edges. Feedback weakens. Local realities become abstractions. Financial systems follow a similar arc. Early frameworks are simple and transparent. Trust is personal. Transactions are visible. As markets scale, intermediaries appear. Instruments become more sophisticated. Risk is distributed across wider networks. Eventually, even participants struggle to understand how value truly moves. Stability seems to increase, but so does opacity. What began as a tool for coordination evolves into a structure few can fully map. History shows that the danger is not complexity itself. It is delayed awareness. When systems grow large, problems rarely arrive as shocks. They accumulate quietly. Minor distortions persist because correcting them feels inconvenient. Temporary measures become permanent. Exceptional policies blend into standard practice. People adapt to each change without realizing they are recalibrating to a lower baseline of resilience. The same patterns surface in medieval banking families, in colonial trade empires, in industrial age corporations. Each generation believed it had learned from the past. Each introduced safeguards, and yet the underlying dynamic remained. Success bred confidence. Confidence reduced vigilance. Over time, the system began to rely on assumptions that no longer match reality. What makes this phase so difficult to detect is that daily life continues. Contracts are honored. Salaries are paid. Infrastructure operates. From the inside, everything appears functional. The pressure exists mostly in aggregate data and long-term trends. Places few people look on an ordinary day. Individuals focus on their immediate roles, trusting that someone else is monitoring the whole. Near the end of this cycle, denial doesn't look like ignorance. It looks like professionalism. Experts defend established models. Institutions cite historical performance. Leaders emphasize stability. Each response feels responsible. Together, they slow adaptation just when it matters most. If these recurring patterns feel familiar, you may want to stay with the channel. This is a kind of historical rhythm we quietly examine here. Because the story is never just about fallen empires. It's about how human systems gradually trade flexibility for comfort, and how that exchange shapes every large society again and again. The deepest mechanics of this cycle are not structural. They are psychological. Large systems do not fail because people suddenly stop caring. They falter because responsibility becomes diffuse. When outcomes depend on thousands of interconnected decisions, no single person feels ownership of the whole. Each participant manages their assigned piece, assuming the broader system is being handled elsewhere. This fragmentation of accountability allows small issues to persist long past the point where they should have been addressed. Trust plays a central role. Modern societies function because most people believe institutions will operate as expected. Contracts will be enforced. Records will be kept. Payments will clear. That baseline confidence allows millions of strangers to coordinate without constant verification. But trust, once established, also reduces scrutiny. Processes become automated. Exceptions are smoothed over. People stop asking how things work and focus instead on outputs. Inside mature systems, incentives slowly drift. Metrics replace meaning. Targets replace purpose. Employees learn to optimize for performance indicators rather than outcomes. Managers learn to protect departments rather than solve cross-system problems. Over time, organizations become collections of internal priorities loosely aligned with their original mission. No one intends a shift. It emerges naturally from layered structures and career pathways. Another force is institutional inertia. The larger an organization becomes, the harder it is to change direction. Policies accumulate. Legacy systems persist. Decisions require consensus across multiple levels. Even when problems are recognized, responses move slowly. By the time reforms are implemented, conditions have often changed again. Adaptation lagged reality. Delayed reactions are especially dangerous because they distort perception. When consequences arrive months or years after decisions are made, cause and effect feel disconnected. People misattribute outcomes to external factors rather than internal design. Temporary fixes create the illusion of control, while deeper imbalances remain untouched. Individuals inside these systems rarely notice the transition from stability to fragility. Their experience is continuous. Yesterday looked like today, and today looks like tomorrow. Changes arrive incrementally. A new policy here, a revised procedure there. Each adjustment feels manageable. There is no single moment when someone stands up and announces that the system has entered a new phase. This is how invisible transitions happen, not through dramatic ruptures, but through gradual normalization. What once would have felt unacceptable becomes routine. What once triggered debate becomes background noise. Collective behavior shifts without conscious agreement. Communication patterns reinforce this process. Bad news travels upward slowly and arrives softened. Reports are filtered. Language becomes cautious. Risks are framed as challenges. Leaders receive summaries instead of realities. By the time concerns reach decision makers, they are often stripped of urgency. At the same time, success stories are amplified. Positive data is circulated widely. Stability is highlighted. This asymmetry creates a skewed picture of health. People believe the system is stronger than it is, not because they're lying, but because they're seeing only a portion of the whole. The final mechanism is adaptation. Humans are extraordinarily flexible. We learn to operate under constraints. We adjust expectations. We reinterpret discomfort as normal. This capacity allows societies to survive hardship, but also enables prolonged imbalance. Instead of demanding structural change, people modify their behavior to fit declining conditions. By the time cracks become visible from the outside, they have existed internally for years. The system has already been compensating, redistributing stress across its components. What appears sudden to observers is usually the end of a long, quiet process. And through it all, life continues. People go to work. Children go to school. Markets open and close. The machinery of society keeps moving, even as its foundations slowly rearrange themselves. In the modern era, the pattern expresses itself through abstractions rather than monuments. It appears in spreadsheets instead of stone, in algorithms instead of edicts, in quarterly reports instead of imperial decrees. The scale is larger, the pace is faster, and the connections are global. But the underlying rhythm remains familiar. Markets now react in milliseconds. Corporations operate across continents. Governments manage populations measured in hundreds of millions. These structures depend on layers of automation and delegation. Decisions are mediated by models. Outcomes are interpreted through dashboards. Human judgment is filtered through technical systems designed to simplify overwhelming complexity. This creates a new kind of distance. People experience results without seeing processes. Consumers see prices, not supply chains. Employees see tasks, not strategy. Voters see policies, not implementation. Each group interacts with a narrow slice of the whole, trusting that the rest is being handled competently elsewhere. At the same time, normalization accelerates. Temporary measures extend quietly. Exceptional interventions become standard tools. Language shifts to accommodate each adjustment. What once would have demanded explanation now arrives pre-framed as necessary. Collective behavior adapts almost immediately. In corporations, this looks like cost optimizations that slowly hollow out resilience. Redundancies are removed. Buffers shrink. Systems become leaner and more efficient on paper, while growing more sensitive to disruption. Performance improves, yet margins for error narrow. In governments, it appears as expanding administrative complexity. New agencies emerge to address emerging challenges. Regulations multiply. Coordination becomes harder. Responsibility diffuses further. Citizens experience services as fragmented interactions rather than coherent policy. Each addition solves a local problem, while increasing systemic weight. In financial structures, it manifests as layers of instruments built atop one another. Risk is redistributed, repackaged, and reinterpreted. Participants rely on ratings and models rather than direct understanding. Stability is inferred from historical performance, even as underlying conditions evolve. Across all of these domains, early discomfort is absorbed. Rising friction is explained away as transitional. Small failures are treated as isolated incidents. People learn to live with delays, shortages, or inconsistencies, adjusting routines rather than questioning architecture. What begins as an exception becomes part of the landscape. The most striking feature of this phase is how ordinary it feels. There is no universal sense of crisis. Instead, there is quiet accommodation. Meetings continue. Projects advance. Forecasts are updated. The system appears busy, productive, and forward-moving. Yet beneath this activity, alignment weakens. Incentives diverge. Long-term stability competes with short-term performance. Technical solutions outpace social understanding. Complexity grows faster than oversight. The gap between appearance and reality slowly widens. Rising tension does not announce itself with dramatic gestures. It accumulates in misconnections, delayed responses, and subtle shifts in trust. People sense that something feels off, but struggle to articulate it. The language of systemic change is often drowned out by operational detail. This is how societies enter their most fragile phase, while believing they are managing progress. The machinery continues to run, but it is increasingly guided by momentum rather than intention. Each participant responds rationally to local incentives, even as the collective trajectory drifts. The present moment, like every moment before it, is shaped by these same forces, not through villains or grand conspiracies, but through ordinary decisions made inside complex structures, through adaptation, through professional routines, through the quiet acceptance of conditions that would once have felt temporary. Every cycle ends the same way it began, with people doing what feels reasonable inside the world they inherited. There is no single turning point. There is only accumulation, small choices layered over time, in small, almost invisible ways. Comfort traded for flexibility, efficiency favored over resilience, and a collective belief that continuity is the natural state of things. What history reveals is not failure of intelligence, but limits of perception. Humans evolved to navigate immediate environments, not sprawling systems that stretch across generations. We respond to visible pressures. We solve problems that arrive with clear edges, but slow transitions evade instinct. They arrive as gradients, not shocks. So societies keep building. They refine structures. They professionalize governance. They optimize flows of information and resources. Each improvement feels like progress. Each layer adds stability in the short term. Yet every addition also increases dependence on coordination, trust, and uninterrupted operation. The more seamless life becomes, the less tolerant it grows of disruption. Over time, narratives replace observation. People rely on reports instead of experience, on summaries instead of substance, on models instead of intuition. The system becomes something described rather than something felt. And when lived reality begins to diverge from official explanations, most individuals adjust quietly rather than confront the gap. The final mistake is not excess. It is misalignment, a widening distance between how structures are supposed to work and how they actually behave. Institutions continue performing their roles. Professionals continue meeting expectations. Metrics continue updating. But the deeper coherence that once held everything together slowly thins. From the outside, Past societies look naive. It seems obvious where they drifted. It feels clear what they should have done differently. From inside, it never appears that way. People experience continuity. They adapt to constraints. They interpret strain as temporary. Each generation assumes it stands at the center of progress, not at the edge of transition. This is why the pattern repeats. Not because humans forget history, but because they live inside it. They inherit systems already in motion. They learn rules already established. They make decisions within frameworks they did not design. Responsibility is distributed across millions of hands, and no one holds the full shape of the outcome. Civilizations do not fall in moments. They transform through phases. Authority becomes procedural. Innovation becomes administrative. Trust becomes contractual. What once relied on shared understanding shifts toward formal enforcement. The system still functions, but it feels different. Heavier, slower, less responsive. Eventually, the stories people tell about stability stop matching their daily experience. Yet even then, life goes on. Work continues. Families gather. Plans are made. The rhythm of ordinary existence carries forward, carrying the system with it. The same quiet arc is unfolded across centuries, across cultures, across technologies. It moves through stone cities and digital networks alike. It leaves behind archives, ruins, and data trails. And it teaches the same lesson again and again. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And the final rhyme is always written in ordinary days, shaped by collective behavior, sealed by adaptation, and remembered only after transition is already past.